Shrewsbury Town achieved one of the most incredible seasons in their modern history in 1718 under Paul Hurst. They fought right to the wire with the likes of Wigan and Blackburn, with vastly bigger budgets, having been one of the relegation favourites before the start of the campaign, managing to get into 80 points. But they lost the playoff final to Rotherham United, and Paul Hurst left under a bit of a cloud for Ipswich. Since then, Hurst has had mixed results, winning promotion from the National League with Grimsby Town, but struggling elsewhere at Ipswich and leaving Scunthorpe over budgetary disagreements. But he did steer Grimsby Town to their best FA Cup run since 1939. So can he do it again in League One? And can he return and rebuild that relationship he had with the Salopians? And can Shrewsbury Town stay up or even do better than that in what's an increasingly demanding League One? Plenty to discuss then on this Summer Deep Dive. Yes, welcome along to the latest EFL Debate Summer Deep Dive, one of 72 we're doing club by club across the EFL between mid-June and mid-July. Already the full set uploaded to YouTube for League 2, to YouTube and Spotify. So go and check that out and get yourself subscribed once you're done with this video. For now, I'm delighted to be joined by Jack from Shrews Analysis. Jack, thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate your time. How does Shrewsbury Town go about continuing to survive and try to more than survive in the challenges that lie ahead in League One?
Hi, Gab. Thanks for having me on as always. Good question. I think with increasing difficulty each season, to be honest with you, especially with the season we're about to go into now, I think if we are to be successful, it'll be based on with a team based on hard work and resilience, which obviously we've seen under Paul Hurst in the past, and outworking teams and outrunning teams. I think, you know, we're not going to outspend teams. We're not going to be able to buy the biggest name players. I think it's on working smart in the transfer window. I think it's on recruiting good people as well as good players, and hoping that hard work, that grit, that resilience manages to dig out some points to see us survive for another year.
Yeah, let's hope you can do that. Where are you with the running of the club? Because it's been the case for a while that Roland Whiteley isn't getting any younger. I think I'm right in saying he's in his 80s now, and he's been quite distant anyway. So there are other people running the club from a day-to-day point of view. How do you feel about how all that side of things is going?
Yeah, it's quite a divisive topic within town fans, to be honest with you. It has been for the past few years, really. You're correct in saying that he is in his early 80s, and he's distant in terms of communication. He's very hands-on in terms of he's based at the ground. He comes to all the games, so he is there. But one of the biggest gripes from supporters is his lack of communication with fans. You know, he hardly ever makes any attempts to communicate with the fans, which is a massive gripe, especially in this day and age when you look at other teams who do have owners that communicate.
Do you think other people, because I mean that wouldn't be a problem if there were other people at the club who are communicating? Are there people at the club who are making an effort to make that connection with fans?
Yeah, so Liam Dooley came in as the new chief exec late last year. And in fairness to him, he has made an attempt to try and start to build those bridges. Communication itself, again, was going back 5, 6, 7, 8 years or so when Brian Caldwell was the chief executive, or at least early on in Brian Caldwell's reign pre-COVID. Again, Caldwell early on was pretty good at communicating with fans. Towards the back end of his tenure, that changed significantly again, certainly since COVID. But yeah, Liam Dooley does seem to be trying to improve that again and try to build those bridges, as I say. I think there's some fans that will always want more from the chairman himself, because at the end of the day, he is the person running the club. And I agree. I think it'd be nice to hear from him every once in a while. But yeah, it's certainly Liam Dooley that's now the face in terms of the person communicating from the hierarchy to supporters. And being honest, I don't see why, from the chairman's perspective, unfortunately, that will change. I can't imagine Wychley coming out and talking to fans that much again, because he's not done it before, and I don't see why he'd change that anytime soon moving forward, unfortunately.
So do you think that for Shrewsbury Town to sustain themselves in League One in the long term, like you have done, I suppose, over the last, since winning promotion in 2015, so over the last 9 years. For Shrewsbury Town to sort of continue that status as an established League One club, is new ownership going to be needed at some point or other?
No, without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah, that's something that's been rumoured for a couple of years now. Well, the chairman says that he's been looking for investment for the past 10 years, but certainly over the past 12 months or so, the rumours regarding investment have certainly ramped up. I'm quite reliably informed that the consortium that have bought Burton Albion, they were interested in buying us late last year, and Wycherley actually rejected them as potential buyers and felt they weren't suitable. So I think they'll be, because we need investment. There's no two ways about that. If we wish to continue at League One, we can't keep surviving in terms of where we are financially. At some point, that will catch up with us if we don't get investment. So there's a lot of fans that want him to sell, and it's getting to a point where, yeah, I agree, we do need that investment. I think he's been commended for what he's done for us in his 25, 30 odd years running the club. Yeah. But it's almost getting to a point now where the longer he continues to hang on, when everyone can see we need investment, he's almost damaging his legacy and tarnishing that legacy the longer it does go on. So we do need that investment. And I think if Burton do have a successful season with that new ownership in place, and we don't, the knives will certainly be out for Wycherley, and fans will be particularly vocal in their feelings of displeasure towards him, and the fact of him rejecting those potential owners has harmed us. I'm pretty certain that will be the consensus if we don't have a good season.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that Nordic Football Group would definitely have been amazing owners for Shrewsbury Town, because it's too early in their Burton Albion tenure to make a decisive judgment one way or the other. However, you look at some of the things that they've put out, you look at the way that they've communicated, you look at the plan that they've outlined and the way that they're recruiting to that plan, and some of the strategic contributions they can make to the football club, the sporting director there has made, as well as the financial contributions. And it's very difficult to avoid the conclusion, why have Shrewsbury Town declined that sort of interest, or have they not at least considered it enough? And that does make me wonder, actually, how seriously are they looking at outside investment? So how seriously is it? So that is a bit of a worry for me when it comes to the structure of Shrewsbury Town, and I do think that the club has to be a bit more outward looking if it wants to continue to build on the brilliant work that it's done over the last 9 years. But I want to come to you on Paul Hurst, Jack. How are you feeling about his return as manager and the work he did at the back end of last season?
Yeah, it's obviously his return was a massive boost for supporters based off his obviously his previous spell with us and the successes that he achieved then. Looking towards the back end of last season, he did what he could with a squad which was very limited, and he had very limited time to change that. He was able to bring in one player in the January transfer window, and then he brought in one as a free agent later on as well. But again, he didn't have much of an impact. So I think he was almost in a no-lose situation last year. If we had have gone down, the blame would have laid at the door of Matt Taylor and Mickey Moore for the squad that they had assembled, which Hurst had to work with. If he managed to keep us up, it'd be a case of, he's the Messiah, the second coming of the Messiah is here again because of what he's managed to do. And obviously that turned out to be the case. If you look at the underlying numbers during his spell, it wasn't particularly amazing, especially in comparison to Matt Taylor's reign and the criticism that Taylor received. I think, off the top of my head, Hurst's numbers were actually at best on par, if not a bit worse than Matt Taylor, which again is an interesting point. But in the eyes of fans, or the vast majority of fans at least, he can do no wrong. There's still the odd handful who remain resentful for the way that things ended in his previous spell. And again, the way that was portrayed at the time, I can understand that. The longer that things have gone on, the more details that have come to light regarding certain individuals makes you believe that what we were told at the time may not be true. So I think, again, the vast majority of fans have forgiven, if that's the right term, Hurst for the manner of that exit last time. But yeah, I think even this season he's on in an almost no-lose situation, as I've already referenced. If we have a good season, it'll be a case of, he's just doing what he does and being very successful. If we have a bad season, then I believe the blame will be put at the door of the chairman for not allowing that investment and not backing Hurst to build a squad which is capable of competing in a league with some very big hitting teams financially. So, yeah, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not entirely sure. But I think things would have to go pretty catastrophic on the pitch for fans to turn on Paul Hurst anytime soon.
Yeah. Do you think that if I look at Paul Hurst's career as a manager, his best achievements have all come when the odds are completely against him? So even keeping Shrewsbury up in 16-17 from a difficult situation after Mickey Mellon left, against the odds. Certainly the 17-18 season was massively against the odds. And then if you look at Grimsby Town's cup run in 1939 in just before last season in 22-23, the best FA Cup run since 1939. It's all been like he beat 3 Premier League sides to get to the quarter-final, or 5 higher league sides as well, which is just incredible. So he does seem to suit the circumstances where people would almost write him off, and sometimes that as a manager can be when he's at his most dangerous.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with that. He's a manager that seemingly does better with his back to the wall rather than when that expectation is there. As you've obviously alluded to, when he has had that kind of the pressure of almost expecting to do well, as was the case at Ipswich, as was the case at Grimsby to a degree. I know he still got them promoted, but I guess you say I would agree with the fact that he seems to be suited to managing a club, certainly from what I've seen of him, where the expectations aren't particularly great, and he does prove people wrong. So from that regard, again, I don't think we could have a better person in place given the circumstances that we find ourselves in. I think it's important to kind of say that, and this isn't a criticism, he's only with us because of what he did last time. You know, if it, on the face of it, if we'd have appointed a manager that had just been sacked from the bottom end of League Two, fans would have been in uproar. But because of who he is, obviously they were desperate to have him back, which I'm not saying that I'm unhappy with his appointment, far from it. But yeah, he's certainly someone that fits, or seemingly fits, our calibre of club in terms of the odds are stacked against us, and can we overachieve and prove people wrong? He certainly seems to be a good man to have at the helm, with that being the objective, as opposed to, say, if we were fancied to do well, whether that would be the case, I'm not entirely sure.
The model that the club wanted to embrace, or certainly the noises suggesting as much this time last year, Jack, were we want to lower the average age and go for younger players that we can develop. And we also want to play a more attractive style. And that, well, neither of those things really came to fruition last season, certainly stylistically, because Matt Taylor, the football under Matt Taylor, wasn't great to watch at all. And also, you've gone to a manager in Paul Hurst who has his strengths, absolutely, no question about that, but you wouldn't consider him a great developer of individual talent, and nor would you consider him a manager who plays particularly attractive football. So do you think that the appointment of Paul Hurst represents a retraction of last year's plan?
Yeah, it was a case of last year when the head coach model was brought in post Steve Cottrell. Obviously, that was the line that we decided to go down. And I don't think it's a secret the fact that chairman's wanted to bring Paul Hurst back ever since he left. There's been various times when that's been a possibility and it hasn't come to fruition for whatever reason, be it certain people being employed by the club, or even last summer, I believe the chairman was keen on bringing Hurst back, but as he was still under contract at Grimsby, we weren't in a financial position to be able to pay the compensation to get him back. Obviously, when he was then sacked by Grimsby, it became a possibility of getting him there. And it is certainly a detraction away from the model that was brought into place last year. Yes, his title officially is head coach, but I don't think anyone's under the illusion of who is kind of the main man in the footballing side of things now. Certainly in comparison to this time 12 months ago, I believe the kind of the clout that Mickey Moore had 12 months ago is nowhere near the clout that he's got now, and it's certainly diminished as a result. Again, be that rightly or wrongly, but yeah, to answer your question, it's certainly a change away from the model, albeit the title is still there in name. I think anyone who's got any idea of the goings on of behind the scenes at Shrewsbury Town, from a fan's perspective or anything else, will be aware of the fact that Paul Hurst will be the man pulling the strings, and it is a detraction away from the traditional head coach model, as was the case when Matt Taylor was appointed last year.
Yeah, it does make you wonder what the future holds for Mickey Moore. So let's go through the squad. I mean, you've currently not got a goalkeeper on your book, so I'd imagine I don't think you're planning to play with an empty net next season. So
Yeah, so we've actually signed one today, funnily enough. So
oh, have you? Oh,
we
go
just
on.
signed Toby Savin, who used to be at Accrington Stanley today.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So that is one position not nailed down because we still need a second one, of course, but it's something. It's a step at least. Again, from what I'm led to believe, I think there's reason to assume that Savin will certainly be the number one goalkeeper heading into the season.
Mhm.
So that it's good to get that. Obviously, it's an important position to kind of to fill, especially as early as possible. It's always nice, so to have that in place is good. We just need to get that that second choice goalkeeper nailed down there now as well.
Yeah, hopefully you can do that. Yeah, Savin, I think did well at Accrington Stanley after getting released by Everton. So hopefully he can sort of recapture that form. Right back now, one thing I was curious about asking you, Jack, is do you think Feeney playing right back is going to be a common theme, or do you think you're going to recruit a more conventional right back?
I would be very, very, very surprised if Morgan Feeney plays right back this season. I think it was a case of when Paul Hurst came in, he wanted to play four at the back, and Feeney was, I say, the only option. We did have Elliot Bennett as well, but he was the only the only option to play there to a degree. I guess he could have played Bennett there, but for whatever reason, he didn't seem keen on it. But no, I don't see a world where moving forward, Morgan Feeney is anything above third choice right back. I think he's a centre back. He
Mhm.
played there because he had to last year. We didn't have anyone else. But no, I don't think it will be a case of seeing Feeney at right back again unless there's some major injury crisis, being honest with you.
Okay, that makes sense. So centre back, obviously you need to recruit a couple of right backs. Hopefully you can get some solid options in there. At the moment, you've got Morgan Feeney, who we've talked about. You've got Aaron Pierre and Toto and Ciala. You've also got a lad called Goodwin. Isaac Goodwin, who I think can play centre back as well, who's come through the youth system. But obviously, your main options are Feeney, Pierre, and Ciala. I mean, these are all experienced players who've got some League One experience and held their own at this level before. So, is this one of the better looking areas of the squad right now?
I mean, I guess from a names on a team sheet perspective, from a names on paper perspective, you'd say yes, as we've got three players to play there, and given that our whole first team squad only consists of 12 players at the minute, it's probably the area that we're, aside from left back, potentially on a relatively well stocked with. I think it's a case that Hurst made it clear that he likes centre halves who are experienced and robust and can defend first and foremost. When he came in last season, he started with a pairing of Shea Dunkley and Aaron Pierre. I think most people expected Jason Trahar, or most people would have picked Jason Trahar at least. I know I certainly would, based off what was seen there. But I think it became clear pretty soon that Hurst didn't particularly rate Trahar for whatever reason. He was obviously now been sold to Burton Albion as well. So it's a case of we've got three players there on paper. I think we need another left-sided centre half to cover Aaron Pierre. Because as
Mhm.
you say, they are all experienced. I think I would personally like to see maybe a little bit more mobility in there. That might be being a little bit harsh to Feeney in particular. Enciala was pretty mobile when he was with us last time, but that was 6 years ago. I think he's 32 now, so I'm assuming that he won't be quite as mobile as he once was with us. So I would like to see a little bit more legs there, just to cover us from the left hand side of centre back as well. But yeah,
Mhm.
it's an area where it's probably one of the not the highest priorities moving forwards of where we need to strengthen. But that being said, I do think we'll see another centre back come in at some point before the transfer window shuts.
Yeah, hopefully you can pull that off. You mentioned left back there. George Nurse, I feel a bit sorry for because I think he's a left back with great potential, but he's had some massive injury problems that have really hampered his progress over the last couple of years.
Yeah, he's been particularly unlucky in that he did his ACL in September 2022, and he then so obviously missed the remainder of that season. Came back for the start of pre-season last year and did it again in a pre-season friendly, so missed the entirety of last season as well. So he's coming into this campaign off the back pretty much of 2 years with no football. So I don't think anyone's expecting him to come into the starting 11 anytime soon. I think Mal Benning will start the season there certainly, but yeah, Nurse is someone that in that one season of regular football that he had with us under Steve Cottrell, he certainly impressed. That being said, it was mainly on the left of a back three, where he played the first half of the season and then transitioned into left wing back later on. But he was certainly someone that fans were pleased with, and proved himself as a steady, consistent performer from left hand side. So I think when he is back fit, he'll certainly be an asset for us. I think it would just be unfair to expect him to um, return to fitness and regular football anytime soon within reason.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. But your other left back option is Malvin Benning, who I always quite liked at Walsall and at Mansfield. He was very consistent and reliable as well. Won promotion in his career with Port Vale. But I'm also feeling that maybe some of his is he just the level again. I think he'd be one of the best left backs in League Two, but I'm also slightly apprehensive about whether for League One is he going to be quite at the level you need. What do you think?
Yeah, so Benning was someone that the fans really took a shine to in the second half of last season in
Yeah.
particular. He was actually only brought in because of the injury suffered by Nurse. He
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't have been signed had Nurse not done his ACL last season. And he was the target of a bit of, in my opinion, unfair criticism early on in the season. But then he did become a regular around the turn of the new year, and certainly from when Paul Hurst took over, he did really kick on and became a fan's favourite. And to be honest, I think he's someone that embodies what we're about and what we need to be about. Someone who, on paper, isn't the flashiest, isn't the most expensive, but he's damn hard working and he puts a shift in and he shows what can be achieved with that attitude and that hard work. I think he's someone that would excel in a Paul Hurst team and has done very well in a Paul Hurst team up to now. And I think he's someone that who will certainly be our first choice left back at the start of the season. And if we can sign more players like him who show that attitude, yes, they may not be the biggest names on paper, as I say, but players that work hard, deserve a chance based off that hard work, and can hopefully be rewarded for that. I think he's someone that fans will certainly be looking forward to seeing, given that he was one of the few bright lights in a season last year, which was pretty horrific at times.
Yeah, well, hopefully he can continue to have that impact. So yeah, fair play to him. So central midfield, you've, I mean, I'm looking at the central midfield options there, Jack, and I'm sort of seeing. I don't really see someone who can maybe screen the defence, especially if you're playing with a back four rather than a back three. Someone who's going to provide that bit of physicality, bit of defensive, a bit like the Abo Agogo you had in 17-18. I don't see an Abo Agogo in this setup necessarily.
Yeah, I think Carl Winchester's probably the closest to that we've got. Again, he's someone that I'm personally a big fan of. I think he can be overlooked by, I'm not saying our fans, but fans in general. That kind of player can maybe not quite be appreciated as much as they
Mhm.
as they should be. And he's someone that I felt we missed when he started last season out at right wing back. Bringing him back into midfield certainly made us better because I think he is a good footballer first of all, but he does provide that bit of solidity, and he's someone that I think will certainly be first choice in midfield moving forward. So, I'm a massive fan of his. Again, I've got a soft spot for those kind of players that maybe could go under the radar a bit like Mal Benning. But I think he's someone who will be that a bit of steel in there if needed, but can still is pretty good on the ball and can offer that bit of a threat going forward as well. So I certainly
Mm.
think he'll be first choice this season alongside another in that central midfield position.
Yeah, that was kind of my. I feel like you. I'm not saying Winchester can't chip in defensively, but because he can make an impact going forward, because he's so dynamic, I'm almost thinking you want a physical ball winner in there alongside him to maybe free Winchester up, possibly.
Yeah, maybe so. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if someone of that ilk was brought in. We brought Harrison Biggins in to play probably one of the more advanced central midfielder this year with
Mhm.
Winchester and someone else. So yeah, I certainly wouldn't be surprised if we had someone of that ilk brought in at some point in the transfer window because we need to strengthen in that area for sure. So knowing the type of player that Hurst likes, yeah, I could see that maybe coming to fruition at some point.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Harrison Biggins there. He's been described by the club as a box-to-box midfielder, so that's something he can operate as. But I was also wondering if he might play as a bit of a pressing 10, because he's a bit of a he's another one, a bit like we've spoken about with Mal Benning. He's got bags of energy. So I'm thinking he could play as a number 10, because I think pressing is going to be a really important part of Shrewsbury's game under Paul Hurst this season.
Without a shadow of a doubt, yeah, he'll want us to be fit. I think we will be fit. We will work hard and try and harry teams and press teams. And I think Biggins will be a big part of that, with that energy high up the pitch. He's someone that I envisage, again, getting into those forward areas as he did at Doncaster. And he might not be the most technical number 10 in the world, but he's someone that, I think will be that more of a pressing option who can get in the box, contribute with goals. That's something that Hurst referenced when he signed, was his ability to break into the box and get on the end of things, which I think will be important for us this season. But I think again he'll embody the type of football that we will play, high energy, high pressing, and a bit of quality, hopefully, when the chances do arrive.
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, in terms of other midfield options coming through the youth system, you might not be knowledgeable about any of these, but I thought I'd just ask you if you've got any sort of steer on the development of Jude Collins, Simba Nyamwanza, or Jack Lowren. Any idea whether any of those are supposed to be quite highly rated, or how they're coming along?
I'd be lying if I said I knew a great deal about them. Certainly recently, I know that Rotherham was involved in the first team when Taylor was still here around kind of early winter time last year, and made his debut. I think he got on the pitch against Notts County in the FA Cup and came on in the Papa John's trophy as well. As for the other two, in fairness, as for all three, I don't know where they stand at the minute. I've not heard anything mentioned. The club were only back for pre-season today, so I've not heard anything to do with which players are going to be involved. But I'd be lying if I said I was expecting any kind of bolters from the youth team to step up and make the grade this year, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like we touched on earlier, I think Hurst's style doesn't always lend itself to quite so many opportunities for those sort of teenage talents. But you have got a bright young talent in Tom Bloxham, who went on loan to Morecambe for the first half of last season. I think he excelled on the right wing, or sort of a right forward player. And he got recalled in January. So what did you make of him on return, and how are you feeling about him going into this campaign?
Yeah, Bloxham, someone who's very, very raw. I think it's easy to forget. I think he's still only 21. I might be wrong, but I think he's still 21. But because he's been in and around the first team for this will be his fourth season as kind of a first team player, it's easy to forget that he is just that age. He's someone who is still very, very raw, and again, that's obvious to see in his play. A typical winger to a degree. Sorry, I just looked and he's still only 20 actually. He's still very, very raw. Physically, his attributes, I think his ceiling is very high. He's big, he's about 6'5", he's quick, but he still needs to have that game smart coached into him and that tactical astuteness coached into him, as well as his end product. He is very, very hit and miss. He's someone who, on his day, can be very dangerous, and he's shown he can be very dangerous at League One level, but equally, when it's not his day and it's not potentially going his way, he doesn't have a great deal of impact, which is the case, I guess, with a lot of young players and a lot of wingers. So the fact that he's a young winger, that's no real surprise. But he's someone that, again, I think a lot of fans like. He was certainly last season, the reason he was recalled and given a spot back in the team was that he was the only genuine right wing option that we had. And given the way that Hurst wants to play, he was the only option to play there, really. So he probably played a bit more than ideal. But again, he's something that I think he's got nearly 100 first team appearances under his belt already by the age of 20, which is incredible when you think about it. So his potential is certainly very, very high. He just needs to, again, as he gets older, as he progresses, as he gets more experience, he needs to start showing that kind of reliability, quick, as well as the actual end product as well. There's no doubting that he could go on to have a fabulous career given the physical attributes that he's got. It's just up to him now to become more reliable and show that he is capable consistently of playing at a higher level than us, which if it does that, it'll be good for us, hopefully, and good for him as well.
Absolutely. Let me tell you a dynamic that I'm quite excited about. You've signed George Lloyd, who I actually think is a good signing because he's got, first of all, he's got an amazing spring on him, even though he's 5'10" or something along those lines. His work rate is incredible, so I know that Hursty's going to love that. And I think he's very selfless with his movement as well. So what I'm thinking is, I reckon George Lloyd might be quite good at creating space for somebody like Tom Bloxham if he's operating on the right. Bloxham, having been a sort of converted forward, so it was kind of a bit like a second striker coming through, and certainly operated in those attacking areas or in the front two when he played 3-5-2. So Bloxham's going to operate a bit like an inside forward, I think. So I reckon George Lloyd's going to make some good runs out into the right, and I think Bloxham can try and use that space and use his sort of direct running and get into goal scoring areas. I think that could be an interesting dynamic to watch with Shrewsbury next season.
Yeah, hopefully. I'm sure that we'll bring in, again, I'm expecting Tom Bloxham to start this season. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't, being honest with you. I think Hurst will want a more experienced winger there to provide that competition as well. But I think, yeah, Lloyd's someone that, a bit like Biggins in a way, will hopefully embody what we're going to be about, and that not a big name on paper, but someone who works hard and fans will appreciate for that. And then if we can get those dynamics and that team cohesion sorted early on, and hopefully that will be a benefit, whoever that is that plays in those positions.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking Bloxham and Biggins. Obviously, yeah, like you've mentioned, you might go for another player on the right, but I think Biggins could be good. Try and get a few goals off the back of Lloyd's sort of selflessness, if you like. But then what I also like is, I think with Bloxham and Biggins, if they're starting, will be the ones going for the goals. But then I think for me, Jordan Shipley might be the one providing a bit of balance on the left if he's playing on the left wing. So how important do you think he's going to be?
Yeah, he'll be vital. He's one of the last remaining players from the Cottrell era, which seems a bit strange to say, given that he only left a year ago. But he's one of the last kind of players with us that are a bigger name on paper, so to speak. So I think the fact that he's still with us for the time being, he's got a year left on his deal, he'll be a very important player. His quality with his left foot is, no one can argue with that. He's got one of the best left feet in the division on his day. It's just up to us to be able to get that out of him consistently. Again, he's someone who's got good experience, got good quality. So yeah, I think if Jordan Shipley is successful and has a good season, so will we as well, because of the ability that he does have on that left wing.
Yeah, well, hopefully he can make a big contribution. So expectations for this season, Jack. Are we looking at Shrewsbury? Is it just to stay up? Do you feel like you should be aiming to try and get a bit higher in the table than just looking over your shoulders, or is realism the order of the day?
Again, I would consider myself a realist, and I think that the aim has to be and is survival first and foremost. It's going to be very, very difficult to achieve that, let alone anything else. There is a small part of my heart which thinks we may upset a few people with that hard work and that resilience, as I say, but I'm certainly not allowing myself to dream or anything like that, given the strength of the division this year and the financial clout of the vast majority of teams this year. We're going to be up against it. There's no denying that. And the fact it's going to be very, very tough. Hopefully, we can have a successful season and not just be looking over our shoulders. But I do think that'll be the case, and that we'll have to work damn hard to achieve our League One status again for an 11th season, as it would be if we do stay up. And yeah, who knows? Hopefully, we can surprise a team or two on the way. But I think it's going to be a tough season coming up for us.
Absolutely. So if we're looking at building, there's obviously the possibility you're going to need more than 11 players. You're going to need depth, but injuries and things like that. But if we're just to look at a best 11 that's capable of keeping you up this season, if I'm thinking Morgan Feeney's going to be good enough at centre back. I think Aaron Pierre is going to be good enough. I think when George Nurse gets fit, I think he's going to be good enough. I think Carl Winchester is going to be good enough. Jordan Shipley and George Lloyd. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So for me, I think you've already got 6 players who are good enough. I think probably the likes of Toby Savin and Harrison Biggins, given they've already been bought in, I think might be the players that you are going to rely on in goalkeeper and number 10 positions. So are we looking at another 3 additions in terms of strengthening that best 11 to give you a squad that's or a best 11 that's capable of keeping you up?
Yeah, if we look at the starting 11, we need a first choice right back, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Again, I even think a centre half, another left-sided centre half to compete with Aaron Pierre wouldn't be the end of the world. So that's 2. Central midfielder, at least 1 to go with Winchester and Biggins, and then probably a right winger, and we need more strikers as well. So I think aside from potentially left back, I think left back is probably the only position that we won't be bringing anybody in. Hurst said that when Benning signed a new deal, that was kind of left back done and dusted. So I still think the vast majority of the pitch, we need that strength in. But yeah, thinking in terms of first choice, certainly 3, 4, maybe even 5, to be honest with you, depending on actually how those players that we've brought in already perform.
Yeah, I would say it's a case of getting the right 3 additions. Because I look at somebody like George. I know you said you need more strikers, and the fact that you've loaned out Max Mata suggests that you want to bring in 1 or 2 others. But I'm pretty confident that George Lloyd. This might not be a popular opinion, but I think George Lloyd is going to cut the mustard for you. Maybe not in terms of goals, but in terms of his all-round play. Which you've done it before with centre forwards who like Carlton Morris and like Stephen Payne in that 17-18 season under Hurst. They weren't necessarily great goal scorers. I don't think George Lloyd's going to be a great goal scorer, but I think in terms of that all-round game, I think he's going to do it for you.
Yeah, hopefully so. He's someone that he's a striker that Hurst likes. Obviously, Hurst has worked with him before at Grimsby, and that was Lloyd's best scoring spell of his career. So hopefully he can recreate that with us as well. But yeah, I think Lloyd will certainly be one of the first choice 2 or 3 strikers that we'll have to choose from. Obviously, you mentioned Carlton Morris there. I think loanees is something that we need to have a good season with. Last season was awful. We didn't have really a single loanee that made a significant contribution to us, which damaged us massively as a club of our size. And if we can get some quality loanees in, that will certainly help. We're not expecting loanees of the calibre of Ben Godfrey, Dean Henderson and Carlton Morris again, as we all had in that one season. But if we can get players that are even half as good as them, I think that will certainly help us be competitive this season.
Let's hope that's the case. Jack, we said the expectation is going to be for Shrewsbury to try and stay up this season. What are the reasons, just to condense everything we've talked about on this podcast, what are the reasons to believe that Shrewsbury Town will beat the drop this season?
I think hard work is the biggest one, and kind of a togetherness in a case of being us against the world. I think those 2 things have to be relied on, and will need to be relied on. We're not, as I say, we're not the biggest team. We're not going to be spending more money than teams, but we're going to have to outwork teams and outbattle teams. And I think we've got someone in charge who will demand that of his players. The fact that he's got a chance to build his own squad will hopefully help with that as well. And that kind of us against the world mentality, which I think will be instilled within the squad, will be the biggest reason that if we are successful, that will be the biggest reason behind that.
Let's hope so. Reasons for doubt, the strength of the league being an obvious one, I guess.
Yeah, finances. The correlation in football is clear, isn't it? The more money you spend, the more successful you are. And I think we'll have probably the 2nd or 3rd lowest budget in the division this season. That's just a guess. I would imagine that teams like potentially Exeter and Crawley and Cambridge will be down there with us. But I think when you look at pre-season predictions, it'll be probably those 4 teams that are in everyone's bottom 4s. I'm maybe being harsh to Exeter there in particular, but I think people predict based off money spent, and the fact we'll be spending certainly in the bottom 4 for budgets mean we'll be in the bottom 4 for most people's predictions as well. That will make it very, very tough. The fact that in comparison to all the teams, we won't be spending anywhere near the money that they're spending. And that will be the biggest barrier that we face this year, is trying to box clever in the transfer market to overcome the lack of spending power that we'll have in trying to compete to be successful this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Too early for a prediction, obviously, but because a lot can happen between now and the start of the season in terms of incomings. But give me a number between 1 and 10 to denote your level of optimism that your ambitions will be realised.
Probably a heart and head prediction. I think my heart says 7. My head says 4.
Okay.
Who knows? Hopefully I'm wrong, but I'm very much going in with the expectations of in for a tough slog, and anything better is a bonus.
Okay, well, hopefully Shrewsbury can prove people wrong like they've done plenty of times before, but it is looking like it's going to be a difficult one for the Shrews. So time to knuckle down together, and hopefully you can defy expectation once again. Jack, thanks so much for your insight. Really appreciate your time. Go follow Jack at Analysis Shrews on Twitter. This has been the EFL Shrewsbury Town Summer Deep Dive. Get yourself subscribed on YouTube and on Spotify. Drop us a review if you fancy, and we'll see you again very soon.